Reading the World Viewed, Reflections on the Ontology of Film by Stanley Cavell. The medium and media of film. If defining, quote, the medium of an art, end quote, is to help us to understand what has in fact been achieved and accepted within the various physical bases of an art, and if the physical basis of movies being irreducibly photographic necessitates or makes possible the meaningful use of human reality and of nature as such, then the genres and types and individualities that have constituted the media of movies are fixed in that specific collection of human beings with which movies have been made, in their utterly specific rhythms of voice and gesture and posture, and in those particular streets and carriages and chambers against and within which those specific beings had their being. They are now gone or old. When they and their particular locales are gone, Hollywood is ended. Its ending is the end of its media, of those arrangements whose significance was unquestioned, conviction in which was immediate. What, then, are the media of movies? What possibilities are now to be explored? Traditional movies can still be made that are satisfying to view, ones with new wrinkles to old formats, e.g., a black man and woman working a straight 40s romance, as in For Love of Ivy, a black city slicker detective impounding the admiration of a southern sheriff in a 50s murder mystery, as In the Heat of the Night, a personally impeccable and cosmically successful black doctor confronting a liberal family with its values in a 30s problem picture, as in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Obviously, a lucrative vein has been struck here, or ones with more convincing and luxurious props, as in the James Bond series, which dresses up Saturday serials with more Baroque violence, more expensive sex, better make-believe technology, and, in the case of From Russia with Love, 4 complete climaxes for the conclusion, a satisfactory bargain, or, at the highest of taste and craftsmanship, well-made adventures or struggles in completely realized exotic settings where the commonness actions require and justify new forms of human motion and give room to an actor of traditional grandeur, as in Kurosawa's historical films with Toshiro Mifune, or in Arthur Penn's choreographing of Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke in The Miracle Worker. Brando is still capable of bringing off this last possibility almost unaided by direction, as in Sayonara, in which he achieves the subtlest portrait known to me of a certain sort of genteel southerner with a sweet and stubborn affectionateness unapproached by southern and western men in search of women. Laurence Olivier, say in Spartacus or in Bunny Lake, is not because while his accomplishment as an actor outstrips Brando's, it is not called upon, and as a natural subject of film, he is weaker. George C. Scott is an intermediate case in this select company, managing to make room for his gifts as actor and as subject in spaces so different as The Hustler and Dr. Strangelove. When a film deliberately avoids cinematic traditions in an effort to modernize its looks, it is likely to run up against a problem quite unforeseen in what we had experienced the film's possibilities. I hope I am not alone in simply being unable to recall the names or faces or presences of so many of the men and women who have come to people American movies over the past 5 or 10 years. This indistinctiveness has sometimes made the movies they are in feel like what I used to think of as foreign films. Featurelessness is perhaps an inaccurate idea. The fact is that many of them look alike to me, or each resembles one of those upsetting composite drawings of, say, the presidents of the United States, or one of those face shapes that run through various hairstyles on a barbershop chart. It is as if an up-to-date string of Goldwyn girls had each been given lines to assume in addition to their poses and then named and sent off to various regions of the studio lot. Baudelaire's perception of union between a woman and her cosmetics is here realized with perfect literality. The new actresses tend to be cosmetics or prosthetics, the adornment that was the whole point of the old chorus line has moved from its position as live landscape into the soul of the action. They are as like one another as the rooms they live in, the beds they use, the convertibles they drive, the cities they pass through, the airplanes that take them there. Samuel Fuller manages to thrive on this indistinctiveness, Sam Fuller manages to thrive on this indistinctness of his people, not letting it deny their humanity. He does it by single-minded insistence on foregoing the characterization, plot complexity, and symbolism on which movies used to depend, preserving only the blocks of crude emotion that all humans share, base levels of sentimentality, magazine hopes, eyes open sex, and working in inventiveness with treachery and violence that lends a kind of originality to these inarticulate mass lives. This single-minded intention discovers a way of achieving old-fashioned movies. Of course, there are exceptions. Lana Turner missed the fate of indistinctness because she was one of its originals. It is a dangerous and prophetic moment in The Bad and the Beautiful when she interrupts Kirk Douglas's gaudy night with the quote starlet end quote. The two women are all but indistinguishable except in age and spatial location. Natalie Wood and Tuesday Weld miss it because the nervous awkwardness of their voices and bodies is out of register with the events of their looks, with the evenness of their looks. Offbeat temperaments still appear, like Zora Lampert, but like Joan Loring in the 1940s, say they do not get enough parts. Anthony Perkins, for all his good looks and good acting, was headed for this indistinctness until Hitchcock discovered a natural meaning for it in the split or theft of personality, psychological vampirism. Perkins' later parts in Pretty Poison and in the Champagne Murders trade on this. The power of his role depends upon his not being what his role in Psycho showed him to be. This rapid dialectic from innocence to guilt and forward ironically to innocence is a perspicuous instance of the kind of history I have hypothesized as the natural result of a star's successive incarnations. The outlaw past underlying the Bogart character is only the purest instance of a familiar root. The interpenetration of lawmen and outlaw wins through figures as various or distant as James Cagney and Lloyd Nolan and Howard Duff. Their histories become part of what the movies they are in are about. So, an account of the paths of stars across their various films must form part of the internal history of the world of cinema. The interchangeability of the new performers, and, of course, not merely of their faces and trappings, but of their demeanor and posture and cadences, and the way they inhabit their trappings, is a perfect negation of that condition of movies I describe as one in which an individuality is the subject of film. These figures no more lend themselves to such study than they do to imitation. To impersonate one is to impersonate all. Their personalities are already impersonations. This further negates or literalizes the condition I characterized as the ontological equality of objects and human subjects in photographs, for these figures are no longer the human part of nature. What needs accounting for is simultaneously that the tradition is still available to current successful films, and also that serious works are in the process of questioning their relation to the tradition, that they are moving into the modernist predicament in which an art has lost its natural relation to its history, in which an artist, exactly because he is devoted to making an object that will bear the same weight of experience that such objects have always borne, which constitute the history of his art, is compelled to find unheard of structures that define themselves and their history against one another. Without this constancy of human experience, history would not develop meaningfully, would not have its ironies and loses and narrow escapes. That is, there would be no human history but merely another species of natural evolution, a condition we may yet arrive at. And the history of an art is a human history. When in such a state an art explores its medium, it is exploring the conditions of its existence. It is asking exactly whether and under what conditions it can survive. What conditions of movie making are to be explored? Question mark. What, quote, possibilities, end quote, of the medium of movies are now given significance? Question mark. The material basis of the media of movies as paint on a flat delimited support is the material basis of the media of painting is, in the terms which have so far made their appearance, a succession of automatic world projections. Quote, succession, end quote, includes the various degrees of motion in moving pictures, the motion depicted, the current of successive frames in depicting it, the juxtaposition of cutting, quote, automatic, end quote, emphasis, quote, automatic, end quote, emphasizes the mechanical fact of photography, in particular the absence of the human hand in forming these objects and the absence of its creatures in their screening. Quote, world, end quote, covers the ontological facts of the photography and its subjects. Quote, projection, end quote, points to the phenomenological facts of viewing and to the continuity of the camera's motion as it ingests the world. The categories of succession and projection include the ones most emphasized in what I have heard and read about the aesthetics of film. In particular, they include what many take to be the basic question of the subject, namely, whether it is the possibility of cutting from one view to another, one sense of succession, or the possibility of continuous projection of an altering view, altered by depth of focus or by moving the camera, which is the essence of the cinematic. I have not made myself trace the experience in the philosophy which led, say, Eisenstein to opt for montage and Bazin for continuity. nor have I collected enough instances of the one and of the other to know my mind on the topic. My excuse for speaking in ignorance of this question is that I have a hypothesis about it, namely that it is not a question. I should be in a better position to say what that hypothesis comes to after developing the categories of world and automism. It is not to be expected that a given discovery shows the significance of an isolated possibility of the art, or that a given possibility yields up single significance for whatever is meant by a medium's, quote, possibilities, end quote. Each is what it is only in view of the others. This is why the general answer to the common question, quote, in what ways do movies differ from novels or from theater, question mark, end quote, ought to be, quote, in every way, end quote. It is why the idea that a movie should be, quote, cinematic, end quote, is either a bad or as special as the idea that a poem should be poetic or as empty. And I was reading The Medium and Media of Film in The World Viewed, Reflections on the Ontology of Film by Stanley Cavell.